Ukraine's defense ministry says Kyiv is bolstering its defenses along its northern border with Belarus by laying thousands of anti-tank mines and digging new trenches. Over the past 6 months, Moscow has repeatedly increased its troop presence in the neighboring country, sparking fears of a new offensive on Kyiv from the north. When Russia invaded Ukraine in February of last year, Moscow launched its attack on Kyiv from Belarus. And for more on this, we're now joined by Marina Miron, a defense analyst at King's College in London. Marina, Kyiv has announced it will strengthen its defenses on its border with Belarus. Why is that?
Oh, thank you for having me. That's a very good question. And perhaps if we look back to February 2022, when Russia launched its attack on Ukraine from the Belarus territory, perhaps it is logical for Ukraine, given the current situation, to create, so to say, deterrence by denial, by making it much more difficult for the Russian forces, should they choose to attack again from Belarus, to get through the Ukrainian defenses. So it is a way to deter the Russian forces and to ensure that the Ukrainian forces wouldn't be overstretched if the Ukrainian armed forces have to be deployed to the Belarusian border if there is an attack indeed.
And there's a lot of talk of a spring offensive in Washington and in Ukraine itself, of course. Do you expect to see any breakthroughs this spring?
Well, that's a $1 million question. I guess everybody's waiting to see what is going to happen and how this counteroffensive is going to be staged. And there are many speculations where Ukraine might be going to attack. Some analysts say that it could be to the south, to get to Crimea and to disrupt Russian logistics, to cut the Russian forces off. And that would be direction of Melitopol or even Mariupol, for instance. There is another possibility where the Ukrainians could just probe along the entire line of defense and see where Russian defenses are shaky and then try to break through there. So we don't quite know. What we know and what is the most important factor here is that the Ukrainian armed forces are capable of staging such a counterattack, which would require leadership and skill. Technology aside, Ukraine has received a lot of technology, including tanks, including armored vehicles. However, conducting combined arms operation, namely using tanks, mechanized infantry, electronic warfare, and close air support, it requires a lot of practice and coordination. So a lot will depend on how well the Ukrainian army can master combined arms operations in terms of the success of the spring offensive.
And just a final question about electricity. Ukraine says it will resume exporting electricity for the first time after months of Russian attacks on its power grid. What kind of a victory does that represent?
Well, there are many ways to look at this. You know, Russia was striking the power grid to coerce the citizens to basically put pressure on the government on the one hand. On the other hand, the Russians wanted to make winter operations as difficult as possible and also create a cost for Ukraine. And so we have to look at it from this kind of context where you have different levers that Russia is trying to use: the psychological, the economic lever, and the military lever. And so from the psychological perspective, it did fail, given that Ukraine is going to export energy again. But we also have to bear in mind that Ukraine has received a lot of generators from Europe. Ukraine has also joined the European network of transmission system operators for electricity. So essentially, this is creating a lot of cost and a lot of debt for Ukraine. So from that perspective, I think Russia has succeeded to impose the costs.
Okay, thanks for that insight, Marina Miron. We'll leave it there. Defense analyst at King's College London.
Thank you.